How much is that?
And we're live. Welcome to the Podcast Editor Mastermind, the podcast about the business side of podcast editing, the show by editors for editors. We are so glad you decided to join us. I'm Jennifer Longworth. You can find me at Bourbon Barrel Podcasting, and below me is
Brian Ensminger. You can find me at toptieraudio.com. And Jennifer, do you want to introduce our guest?
I would love to. Our special guest today is Daniel J. Lewis, one of the newly inducted members of the Podcast Hall of Fame. Got to be there for that and at PodFest. So congratulations and welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. It was great to have you there with me as well, Jennifer, to celebrate. And it's great to be here to talk about one of the things I'm most passionate about right now, besides podcasting, of course, in general, but one of the specific things.
Yeah, and that topic is Podcasting 2.0, which I don't know anything about. I went to a session about it at PodFest and went, yeah, I know nothing about this. I need to have someone on my show to tell me all about this.
I'm happy to help.
So just as an overview, I've been hearing Podcast 2.0 for a while, but I had no idea what it was. For someone who's like, well, I don't even know, I haven't even figured out 1.0 yet. What is this 2.0? And what's the basic overview?
Yeah, think about it as 1.0 first. We've had Podcasting 1.0 pretty much untouched since the beginning. Sure, along the way, Apple added some additional tags, like we got the episode number field, season number field, and a couple other things here and there. But besides that, podcasting development and innovation has been somewhat stagnant for years, even though the ability to extend podcasting has existed since the beginning, because RSS, let's get a little technical here, RSS is just a particular flavor of XML code. And the X in XML stands for extensible. So from the beginning, this thing, the core technology that makes the distribution of podcasts possible, RSS feeds, has always been extensible, but people have tried to do things with it and extend it, and it's just not gone anywhere. So when Adam Curry, the co-creator of podcasting himself, decided to really start innovating more in the space and to create Podcasting 2.0, then things started catching on. Then we started getting momentum, and developers jumped on board, podcasters jumped on board, podcast hosting providers, and even what's so exciting, like we might do all of this innovation even if Apple and Spotify and Google and all of the big companies never do anything with the innovations we're making. But it's so exciting that as of a couple of weeks ago, Apple announced official support for the transcript tag, which is coming from Podcasting 2.0. They don't say it's Podcasting 2.0, but they do reference the podcast namespace, which is the technical thing that is extending the RSS feed in order to enable those Podcasting 2.0 feeds. So what Podcasting 2.0 enables is extra functionality inside of a podcast app. If you put this information in your feed and use your publishing tool to put that in there, and the extra functionality can benefit you, it can benefit your audience, it can benefit developers making a better experience in their app, and it can even benefit those nasty advertisers.
Oh, nasty advertisers.
Well, I know a lot of podcasters, especially the us indie types, we tend to sometimes think, oh, I don't want advertisers. Advertisers are stinky, and I don't like listening to ads. There's a place for ads for sure. But the thing that we often forget to think about when we are innovating in the space is really, how does this also help the advertisers, the people who have all the money? There are ways that even the advertisers can benefit from this, even if some of the podcasters don't care about them.
This is really interesting to me because I've been very much the open source fanboy for a while. I love what this is about. At the same time, I remember Spotify, or some people previously from Spotify, shared some articles a couple of years ago about how real innovation can never take place in an open environment, that you have to have a closed system to truly innovate and that kind of stuff. This seems to be kind of revealing that as maybe not entirely true. What's your perspective?
Not true at all. Yeah, Spotify is, they're frustrating because that is their perspective, is they only really know themselves. And even with the tools that they've developed with Anchor, or now Spotify for podcasters, it's really about promoting Spotify. And they look internally for their solutions instead of externally. And that's really hurting the industry because there's so much innovation happening that they just won't listen to. People will ask them, when are you going to support podcasting 2.0? And they're just like deer in the headlights. And they just don't know what it is. They won't look into it. They seem to not care. They just decide, we're just going to do our own thing. So like even Daniel Ek, the founder, the head of Spotify right now, has come out and said certain things like RSS is holding us back. We can't innovate on top of RSS. I think he even said something like we can't extend RSS. And you heard me say it earlier. It is in the very definition of what RSS is to be extensible. So yes, we can extend it. And will Spotify ever support any of these new features? I don't know. Maybe now that Apple supports some of them, maybe. But the thing is that we shouldn't be waiting on these big companies to fix things. Instead, we should be innovating regardless of what they're doing. And that's what Podcasting 2.0 has been doing. And it's just so nice to see some validation, though, from a big company like Apple. That's just one feature. And transcripts would be, we've had people talking about transcripts, so I want to explain that one a little bit more first. People have been talking about transcripts for a while, but pretty much what they've been talking about putting in with your podcast is a block of text somewhere. And even worse, putting that block of text in a PDF file that someone could download. That is not accessible. And the whole point really of transcripts is for accessibility. Yes, they're a little bit better than nothing for search engine optimization, but it was just so limited what you could do before. Now there is a specific tag in the RSS feed that enables you to upload a transcript format, not just a PDF, a block of text, but an SRT or a VTT file, which is a special time-stamped where it's line by line with timestamps in it. You can upload that with your episodes so that in a modern podcast app that supports the transcripts, it can play like closed captioning in a show. And that's great, not only for the accessibility to hearing impaired people, but also just understandability. Like if someone was trying to hear, wait, what was that thing that they said? I couldn't quite hear them, or they said it too fast, or I didn't quite get that. They could enable the transcript for a moment, see what was said, or maybe they're trying to jot down exactly what you said because it was such an inspirational quote that they want to write it down verbatim, and they can see that from the transcript. And that kind of idea of using excerpts, that's something else that some of these apps could start to build in, where we've had all of these apps before that let you clip audio. Well, you could have an app that has a little bit of AI to it to recognize where a sentence starts and ends and let you very easily clip the last sentence that you heard or the last two sentences, because that would be enabled through the transcript. And that's just one feature here with the transcript. Some of the other really exciting features are the ability to have what we call cross-app comments, which would be where you could comment on a podcast episode inside of your podcast app. So none of this going somewhere else to comment on the episode, but you comment in your app, and then someone in a different app could see that same comment and respond to it. And the podcaster could get involved with their own app or third-party service like Podgagement or something else. So it's creating this engagement around the episodes inside of the app. There are other features like live streaming. If you do live streaming like you guys are doing right here, what you could do is it's powered by the thing called the live item tag, which is like a new item or a new episode in an RSS feed, but it's wrapped with this live item tag instead of a normal item tag. And that enables these modern podcast apps to recognize a couple extra features that you add in to say when you're going live. So like when we went live tonight, if you use the live item tag in your podcast RSS feed, someone with a Podcasting 2.0 compatible app would see that notification that you're going live soon. And then when you go live, they would receive a notification to be able to tap in that. And inside of the podcast app, they could listen to the episode live being recorded. That's some of the cool stuff. So much more that is around engagement, around enabling extra features for your podcast or ways that things can display better. Like one of the other really cool things is the person tag. Think of it as adding credits to your podcast as a whole or your individual episodes. So like if you look inside of Apple Podcasts, for some of the podcasts, if you look down at the bottom of the listing, you'll see a picture of the hosts and co-hosts. Well, that right now inside of Apple Podcasts, that's all proprietary stuff. But we have the ability to do that with RSS feeds now so that you could very easily see who the hosts are for this particular episode or the show as a whole. And then the apps can expose that information and cross-link it. So if you tap on Brian Insminger, you would get to see all the other podcasts that Brian has been on or been a guest on or hosted. That kind of thing can be brought into the app. So all of this stuff, and so many more features too, is about giving the podcaster more control, more features, giving the audience more ways to engage with the podcast and learn about the podcast, and giving developers more opportunities to make their apps better and a more engaging experience to keep the audience inside of the app. And even for advertisers, there are opportunities like being able to better track consumption of an episode or track the engagement a little bit better, or like with chapters. That's another thing, another really fun feature. We've had chapters in podcasting for a while, and a chapter is, think of it like this. If you're listening to an audio podcast and then an image pops up at a certain point for your sponsor or something that you're talking about, maybe you're talking about Hindenburg, and so you display the Hindenburg logo and a link to Hindenburg, that's made possible with a chapter when it happens in the middle of the episode. We've had chapters for a long time before, MP3 chapters, enhanced AAC podcasts, but the big problem with that was they were embedded in the media file. So if you ever wanted to change the chapters, you had to change the media file. So if you wanted to update a chapter, especially for the audience that already downloaded your episodes, you couldn't update it. They would have to re-download it, but they wouldn't even know to do that just to get new chapters. So Podcasting 2.0 has what we call now super chapters, and that extends things. First, it moves it outside of the media file into a separate file, so you can update those chapters anytime. And the podcast apps that support these modern chapters will check the chapters every time your audience engages with your episode. So it looks for any updates. You can do really cool things with that can help you as the podcaster, help the audience, even help advertisers too. Like maybe an advertiser, you're using dynamic ad insertion, and you can then make whatever that chapter link is for your advertiser, you can switch it out based on whatever your advertiser is for that, or whatever you are promoting. Maybe you're promoting a limited time thing. So for this week, the image of that chapter is something that says like this week only. And then a few days later, it says 2 days left. And then after this week, that image then says, sorry, this isn't available anymore, or check back later or something like that. And that's all done without your having to re-upload your media file or anyone having to re-download the episode or anything like that. It's much more dynamic. So it's so much more engagement is possible with Podcasting 2.0.
So since we're a show by editors for editors, why should editors care? And how do we absorb and process this knowledge and then convey it to our clients? Brian?
I've got my podcaster hat on right now, and I'm loving this. And part of me is going, how do I do all these things? The other part is if I put on my editor's head, like, is there a way that I can use this to differentiate myself? Is there a way that I can use this to bring value to my clients that they wouldn't have normally expected in a way that's valuable to them? Like, I'm going to be selfish. How can I make it valuable to me?
Yeah, most of this happens on the publishing side because it's in the RSS feed. So most of it would then be something that if you're only editing the audio or video of the episode, then most of these features would not be something that you would take care of. However, there's the transcript. And like with Hindenburg 2.0, and eventually someday coming to Adobe Audition, and Audacity recently started implementing transcripts in Audacity, there's the option and the opportunity for you as the editor to go ahead and get that transcript for your client. And as you're editing the audio, you're able to also refine the transcript a little bit because you're familiar with what's in the episode. Like, for example, when I edit my own transcripts, and I use an AI system to generate my transcripts, But one of the things that I look for is I always look for proper nouns and URLs. And I go back and correct those. Because like just my own domain, for example, theaudacity2podcast.com, there are several things that the AI often gets wrong. Like sometimes it doesn't include the word the in the domain. Sometimes it has that as the space Audacity to podcast. Sometimes it says the 2 is the number 2 instead of TO. Sometimes it hears Audacity as some different word like oddity or something else like that. And so weird things like that can happen. So I just look for any occurrence of like .com, .org, .net, based on whatever I remember saying in my episode. I look for any occurrence of a slash to make sure whatever comes after the slash is correct. So like theaudacity2podcast.com/microphones. So I check to make sure that's correct. And those proper nouns I can check. So this is because I'm familiar with my own content and what I said in it, I can correct the transcript. So you as editors could also do that same thing, especially if you're working with a tool. Now, several of them are starting to let you see the transcript in your editing workflow. You could very easily see, wait, that transcript doesn't match what was just now said. I'm just going to correct that really quickly. Yeah, that does take a little bit more time, but then that's a value add that you can offer to your clients to say, by the time this episode is edited, I can also provide for you the transcript. It's AI powered, but I did a little bit of touching up as I was going through and editing your content to make sure your names, brand names, proper nouns were all correct, and your URLs are all correct. You can offer that. As well as, since you're working with the audio, you could either by AI powered or just as you're making it, you could take note of the timestamps for when the subject changed, because those could be chapters. And you could offer those chapters, even create the chapter file for your client so that they could upload that in their system or copy and paste it. So that could be something too that's coming then from the audio editing process that then is a value add for you to then give to them and say, here's something else. Now your podcast can be podcasting 2.0 compliant because here are these two things I've done for you that you can then add in your publishing tool. Or if you work with the publishing tool yourself, certainly you can do a lot more for them with podcasting 2.0.
So I do publish for like half my clients. About half of them, I send them the file back, and the other half I put into their media hosts, some of which have podcast 2.0 and some of them that are getting there, maybe.
Libsyn.
I didn't say any names.
I didn't say Libsyn. Well, who was talking about Libsyn? Who thinks that Libsyn is behind on this?
But that's a great point, right? Because as these are new features, right, they're not evenly supported among media hosts. How much would we have to stay on top of which hosts our clients are using and what's available to them? Because I would hate to, I'm not going to throw any particular company on the bus, but let's say that I was creating the chapters for them and I haven't done my due diligence, or I'm on a consulting call and they haven't decided who they're going to host with. And then they hire me, I provide them this chapters file and their host doesn't support it. Like, that's kind of an embarrassing situation to be in. I'm charging them for something that they now can't use. Do we have to stay on top of this? Like, what are your thoughts?
It is something that I think that you can encourage your clients to make sure that they're using a hosting provider that supports podcasting 2.0, or at least gives the flexibility that you can add these tags in manually yourself, which gets complicated. I'm working on the website. We didn't even mention this. Podcasting2.org is now the home of Podcasting 2.0. It has a lot of technical information there, but we're also working on making it a whole lot more user-friendly and podcaster and audience-friendly and speaking in regular terms that mere mortals, the rest of us, can understand. But we really want to focus on the benefits through that site. So one of the things that I'm making there is a tag generator. So even if, like since I mentioned Libsyn, Libsyn 4 lets you actually manually insert RSS tags. I think Podomatic also lets you manually insert some RSS tags yourself. So even if they don't support some of these features, if you have that ability to put in the RSS code yourself, you could generate that and put that in. But the big thing, so if someone is, let's say they're going to Spotify for podcasters, why would you have them as a client if they're going to do that? But that aside, If they're going
it's a conversation we've had.
Yeah. And if they're going on a platform like that, you could encourage them to do something different. But if they're really set on whatever platform it is, I mentioned Spotify for podcasters because that's probably going to be the last ever to support podcasting 2.0. What you could do is, if they just will not switch, you still have an option of a couple services are starting to enable you to layer on some of these features. Like Blueberry has this service called Podcast Mirror at podcastmirror.com. It was free for a while. Now it does cost. There is no free plan. You might remember the old days of FeedBurner, where we would take an RSS feed that was not a podcast RSS feed and turn it into a podcast RSS feed with FeedBurner through what back then they had the SmartCast feature. FeedBurner is completely rebuilt now. It's really just pretty much a feed proxy service. You still can add some of that podcast information. Don't use it like that. But what Podcast Mirror from Blueberry, the podcast hosting company, what Podcast Mirror can do is it can take a podcasting 1.0 feed and turn it into a podcasting 2.0 feed, allowing you to add some extra stuff on mainly the main top level. So you can't add the episode transcripts, at least not yet. You can't add episode level information, but you could add things like the value for value Satoshi streaming. You could add things like the person tag at the top level of the podcast. You can add a few other things like that to the RSS feed. So you'd run your feed through Podcast Mirror, and on the other side, you get a new feed URL that then has some of these podcasting 2.0 features. That does cost. Right now, I believe it's $60 a year with Blueberry. I don't know if it's even part of their affiliate program, that you would get any kind of affiliate payment if you referred people to them. I'm not sure about that. But it's a proposal that you could include with them to say, all right, if you want transcripts and chapters, I'm happy to do that for you. That's going to be this little add-on, an additional service. And we're going to have to set you up with Podcast Mirror so that you can take advantage of a few of these more features. Although, unfortunately, chapters and transcripts are not something that Podcast Mirror can do yet. They said it's just a technical limitation right now. So it's something that I'm sure they're working on.
So when I have these consultation calls with new clients, which seem to be coming out of the woodwork for me right now, and they say, which media host should I choose? I'm starting to think I need to steer them away from certain places and to other places, but I'm not sure which places those are, nor how much it really matters. And I don't have anybody on Libsyn.
I kind of hate to throw Libsyn under the bus a bit because they've been around this space and supported podcasters for so long. It's just the truth that we have to be honest about is that they do not have native support for podcasting 2.0 features built in. So if you have a client that's really interested and wants to take advantage of the podcasting 2.0 features, the places that I personally recommend are, if they like a WordPress workflow, then Blueberry, because it's all right there with PowerPress and it integrates really nicely and everything. If they're not wanting a podcast-focused workflow, then the other two places I highly recommend are Captivate and Buzzsprout. Both of them are really good with their podcasting 2.0 support. Captivate more so than Buzzsprout. And I think that Captivate, while they don't have the most podcasting 2.0 features, I think that they've implemented them the best. And Buzzsprout, I would say, is the easiest.
I think that would probably mirror my impressions of them. I've not worked on a Buzzsprout show, but hearing them talk about how they work with how their workflows work, because I listen to their podcast because I'm a nerd, it sounds like they're very focused on that new indie podcaster that doesn't want to learn all the technical stuff. We're hosted with Captivate, so I'm reasonably familiar with what they offer in terms of 2.0 features. We've got some of them enabled for our show right now. One thing I'm wondering is I would love to be able to use the live item tag, but I don't think that that's currently supported natively by Captivate. Is there a workaround other than Podcast Mirror?
Right now, no, but that is something that you can do with Podcast Mirror because technically, even though it's a live item, it actually goes at the channel level. So it would go before the episodes. It doesn't go inside an episode. It basically goes before the episodes, even though it is an episode technically different. So that is something that could work with Podcast Mirror. The support for these specific features is changing as some of these developers are implementing support, and it's changing in the apps too. So that's why podcasting2.org exists, is to help track some of this so you can see what features are supported in what apps. And there's going to be a spin-off site, by the way, that I've actually been working on longer to show a whole grid of like, this is how this feature works in this app, or this is supported fully in this app or partially in this app, even down to stuff like what apps support hyperlinks in their show notes, that kind of thing. But that's a spin-off site. That's not completely Podcasting 2.0 related. But right now, podcasting2.org, if you go there and like if you look at the podcast namespace section and you click on a tag, then you can see the publishing tools and the hosting providers that support that tag, so that if that particular feature is really important to you, then you can know this is what you should recommend then to your clients to use.
And thinking about how to, as a listener, these aren't in Spotify. Spotify doesn't care. What app do I need to download and have my listeners download to be able to take advantage of these? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Right now, it is limited, but it is growing. Because, like, for example, with Apple, with the upcoming iOS 17.4, or maybe it's even out by the time that the people listening download this episode and listen to it, 17.4 is the version that will include support for the transcripts. So that will be inside of Apple Podcasts as of 17.4. Other popular apps, Podcast Addict supports a few of these things. Podcast Guru is supporting some of these things. Pocket Casts has done some work to support things, but they not fully. But they are excited about it. They just haven't done all that much yet. I don't quite know what's going on there. But then there are other apps that are more independent, some of them programmed by one person somewhere. And the best thing to do is go to podcasting2.org, and there's an apps page where you can then see, here are all of the apps. For right now, you can pick a platform, like you want to see what's everything that works on iOS, what's everything that works on Android. You click on an app, then you get to see the list of here are the features that this app supports. So you can know, oh, this is a really good one, or try it out yourself to know how good it is. It supports all of these features. These are important to my client. So this is what I'm going to suggest that my client then promote to their audience, and encourage them, even saying things like, when they start to use some of these features, they could say things like, hey, if you need the transcript for this episode, did you know that I put transcripts out with the episode and you need a special podcast app to play it? Get a new podcast app through, and one of the places that you can send them is podcastapps.com or newpodcastapps.com or modernpodcastapps.com or podcasting2.org/apps. They all pretty much have the same information. It's just different domains, different designs on these things. But encouraging then your clients to encourage their audience to use a modern podcast app to be able to take advantage of these features and to really focus on how does this benefit the audience. That's the thing that I think is always important to bring this back to, is even though we can get excited about some of the technical things, or, oh, this is going to be so cool to make this possible, we need to really think about, does the audience care? Not just even the podcast editors, but the people that we're editing for, their people, do they care about this kind of stuff? And we can encourage them to care by pointing out the benefits of things like the transcripts, the engagement, the interactions, the opportunities to stream money to their favorite podcasts through the value for value system that is the streaming Satoshis and all of that. That kind of thing, focusing on that end user benefit.
One of the things I'm wondering, as an editor who occasionally gets questions from my clients, is it worth it for us to educate our clients, or even taking it a bit further, if a client has heard something through a certain unnamed podcast person at a large company who thinks it's a big joke, right? Is it worth investing the time to do that? And if so, what are those specific benefits for our clients that we should be prepared to share with them that will help us build that? And I have some ideas, but I want to hear yours.
Yeah. Well, if not you, because some of your clients are might not even be listening to any podcasts about podcasting or keeping up with podcasting news because maybe they're just so busy creating their content and then doing whatever else they do, running their business or their hobbies or their life, that they're just not interested in what's going on in the podcasting industry. So this can be opportunities for you as podcast editors to step up and help educate your clients on here are some new cool things that you could do with your podcast. Would you be interested in taking advantage of these features? And I think that those top few features to really point them toward would be transcripts, chapters, and cross-app comments. Those are the big things that really stand out, I think, that don't cost any money, don't get involved, that aren't involved with the crypto and the streaming Satoshis in case anyone is afraid of Bitcoin. But the Bitcoin thing, the streaming Satoshis is kind of nice to be able to do, or micropayments, we could call it. I think those are some of the top things to really focus on for the audiences.
I'm actually glad that you mentioned that. The cross-app comments, of course, sounds great to me. As a podcaster, I've always thought it's ridiculous to have to send people somewhere else to have the conversation, right? We're having this. We want to extend our conversation. So please connect with me on, I don't know, circle.so or Facebook or whatever. So I love that idea. Is that even implemented?
Yes, it is. And it is very cutting edge right now. It's a little bit complicated. There are some issues that need to be figured out, like moderation abilities and such. But it is something that is being worked on. And it is, I think, the most exciting feature because it is very audience focused. It's engaging. It's something a podcaster can get excited about. It just has to be supported. And there are some little hurdles to be worked through. But I think that this year, 2024 for the record, we will have this solved. And it will then be adopted more by other apps. Right now, it's just kind of a lot of stuff is questionable and a little bit seemingly complicated. But some people are saying, no, it's not all that complicated for developers to support this. But it's going to get easier. And that's the cool thing about all of this, is that the technology will disappear in the sense that we won't have to care about the technology. It could just get to the point of you publish a podcast episode, and now you can comment from whatever app you want. The actual technology you use doesn't matter. That's coming. We're working toward that. So that's definitely one of the exciting things. I think, I can't remember if I said it too, but chapters would be, I think, another really cool thing that could help break up the content, make the content more reviewable. Yeah, that does mean it's also skippable, but would you rather your audience abandon your episode or skip to exactly what they want? That's a good question that you could ask to your clients if they're saying, well, won't they be able to skip? Yeah, and that's a good thing.
Yeah. And David says that they're using it. I'm assuming that he's talking about the cross-app comments. That to me seems like the no-brainer because I have never talked to a client who said, I'm getting too much engagement. I wish people would stop getting back to me, right? What I always hear is I'm talking into a vacuum. I never hear anything. I ask people to email me and they don't.
Yeah.
Of course, this can't necessarily fix that, but it certainly removes a hurdle.
Oh, for sure. And that big hurdle of stepping outside of the app, that's a big one because once you leave the app, then where do you go? And when you're outside of the app, there are all of these other distractions of other apps, or you get onto Twitter to send a tweet, an X tweet, which sounds like you're tweeting your ex. That's not it.
Let's not do that.
Yeah. You get on there and you want to send a comment and then you get distracted by, oh, here are these other things I'm reading. Or just if you're doing this while driving, well, don't. You can't do that. But what if it could be so that while you're listening to a podcast and you have something you want to say back to the podcast, you just press a button and start talking and let go of the button or press the button again. You stop talking, confirm it, send it, and that's your app. That's your comment, and it's posted in the app, and it's posted in all of the other apps. It could be that kind of thing, and it's right there inside of the app. So keeping people inside of the app then makes that process for people to engage so much more seamless because they don't have to go somewhere else then.
And so one of the things also I've heard is about a pod roll to keep people in the app as a 2.0 that you can like recommend your favorite podcast. Hey, if you like this, you'd like them too. I mean, Am I on target or?
Yes, exactly. Right now, if you look in Apple Podcasts, for example, many podcasts will have this, and I've started tracking this with one of my other services, that you'll see basically like you might also like or listeners also listened to. That's all algorithmically generated, and you can't control that. So maybe, you've got the I Love Cats podcast, and then down at the bottom is the Cats Are Evil, Let's Kill All Cats podcast. You don't want that recommended on your podcast.
No.
Apple, for some reason, decided you've got enough crossover audience between these two podcasts that they're recommending that. Or maybe you get more control of that with your own recommendations, and that's powered by Podroll. You could also recommend your other podcasts that you host, or your clients could recommend their other podcasts, or other podcasts that they think are very relevant, have some opportunity to cross-promote, even maybe selling some cross-promotion there. What this does then in the apps, when you put in this Podroll, and I hate the name, but the Podroll comes from the idea of BlogRoll, and some people don't even know what BlogRoll was. It's really just, it's a word to describe recommending other podcasts. So think of it as recommendations. You put in there a certain number of podcasts that you want to recommend, whatever that number is. And then these podcast apps that support it can then display that. And they might display it in different ways. It might say something like, this podcast also recommends these, or you might also like, just like Apple Podcast has. But the thing is, the podcaster is in control of this. And that presents all kinds of opportunities then for some of the collaboration between these different podcasters and the cross-promotion, or just growing the other podcasts that same podcaster hosts.
Do want to hit a quick comment before we change directions. David's saying that people are always like, they have to install another app. Don't like that.
Yeah.
Totally get that. I'm in the same boat. And especially when I think about if I was to send people to a platform that's specifically designed to distract them, right? Most of our platforms are designed to get in the way of what you wanted to do to keep you there so you come back and do what you forgot to do, right? And so if it's comment on my thing, I want them to be able to do that. So I'm totally with that. I would love to be able to get people into one place that's distraction-free so they could focus and then move on with their lives. Thinking about this, again, putting on the editor or the producer or the podcast manager hat, are there things that we need to be careful of or cautious about when it comes to podcasting 2.0 and our clients' shows?
If you are working with transcripts, this is something that you need to watch out for, is potential liability. If you're working, and you might not always know what to look for because it could come up in random places. But just an example here. If your client said in the podcast, let's not kill puppies, but the transcript didn't catch the word not. So the transcript would say, let's kill puppies. You have to watch out for that kind of thing. That could be very problematic, because then what if it's some kind of medical advice that's being given? What if it's financial advice or anything like that, that if the wrong advice is practiced, then it puts someone in trouble, the podcaster in trouble. And then the podcaster would say, well, I didn't personally write that. It was my editor who put that in there. So then you're in trouble for having something that wasn't correct. That kind of thing is not very likely to happen. You would have to look out for the kinds of fields where stuff could get in more trouble, like the scientific, medical, financial, legal fields. Some of those would be more to be very, very careful with those kinds of things. Some of the other dangers of this would be overselling the dream of this, because all of these features are great and everything. The unfortunate truth is that as of February 2024, the apps that support all of these cool features make up about maybe 2 to 3% of the global downloads of podcasts.
Excluding Apple, I'm guessing, since 17.4 isn't out yet.
Right. Of course, so that will significantly change. But like the live item tag or cross-app comments or things like that, not very much support right now. So if you're telling someone about, hey, let's get you involved with cross-app comments, and then they expect to see it inside of Spotify, that's not going to happen. So you have to be careful not to oversell what's possible. But the cool thing is that the podcasts that support these new features and promote the modern apps that support these features, they see a completely different shift. So instead of, for most podcasters, Apple Podcasts is going to be number one and then Spotify number two. Some of these platforms see, or these podcasters see significant shifts where instead of it being Apple at number one, it's whatever the particular app is that they recommend the most as number one. And then more of their audience is able to take advantage of those features.
I was checking my stats because I was like, pretty sure Apple is our winner. And I shouldn't do this because I'm on a show, but I did it anyway. So yeah, Apple's still our winner, but we don't really push the other apps. So we do have some of those 2.0 features enabled, but we haven't spent any time really promoting other apps. Is that something that you would encourage a show like us that's really for the editors to do?
It could be, especially because the editors need to be familiar with what are some of these cool new features coming so that they can better promote it to their clients. You can better promote it to your clients. And it would be nice to then try some of these things. And where this can then trickle down to the podcasters and what they do is not only just recommending these apps in their podcasts or saying, hey, you might want to try this other app, but they might decide to change some of their marketing. Instead of making their Apple Podcasts or Spotify link the most prominent link on their website, maybe instead they're linking to one of these other apps that a couple of them are cross-platform. Some of them are only Android, some are only iOS, but they could make those decisions if they decide, wow, this experience is so much better for my audience. I really want to get my audience moved over to this other app. They can make those decisions to stop saying, find us an Apple Podcast or wherever you get your podcast. They could instead say, right. Well, I really suggest they don't say podcast apps in their calls to action, but they could link to their page where their page then has those modern apps more prominent than anything else. And then the audience can start to move over, especially if the podcaster is educated by you, the editor, and the podcaster then educates their audience on this is the benefit you would get by switching over to this other app.
On a personal level, I've been on a quest to find a good podcasting 2.0 app that is cross-platform because I like Cast-O-Matic, but it's iOS only, and I don't like that. I've been checking out Podcast Guru, but their list feature is just abysmal. Like they've got a lot of things figured out really well, but I put things into a list so I can listen to them, or I have it out of. Anyway, I'm going to shut up about that. I do have a question that's a little bit uncomfortable to bring up, but one of the things that we were looking for is how well represented is the broader community within the podcast 2.0 space. And what I noticed is almost all of the voices that I'm hearing are male. And I'm wondering, are there any women involved in this? Is it truly a dude thing? And if so, is there anything that can be done?
Well, here's the thing, and some people might not like the way that I put this. I have to refer to stereotypes here because stereotypes exist because they're kind of true in many cases. Look back to the beginning of podcasting itself. It was almost all male-dominated, both on the audience side and the producer side, because podcasting is very geeky. And geeky stuff tends to attract more men than women. That's just kind of the nature of the differences between men and women. So because of that, because podcasting 2.0 right now is still very geeky and technical, although it's already gotten easier than it was a couple of years ago, because it's kind of geeky, that tends to attract a more geeky audience, which tends to be more male. That said, there are some women in this space. I don't think there are any women developing the apps themselves, but I know that she goes by Dame Jennifer. I don't know what it is with Jennifers in podcasting, you guys. But there is, a woman who is involved and excited about this, has supported it. And she is not a programmer. She's an animator, actually. And she just is passionate about podcasts. And so she's become somewhat of an evangelist for this and supporting it and helping communicate about it and make little videos here and there and things. And that's something that she's able to do, interested in doing, even though she's not developing. And I'm sure there are others. Well, take Elsie Escobar, for example, has said in the feed, Libsyn's podcast, that she said some of these features are so exciting, but how do we communicate this? How do we explain
Right.
this? Or there's limited support. She's bringing out the fact that, yes, there's this truth. Well, her saying that in a recent episode of Libsyn's The Feed is what really pushed James Cridland and I to finally make something happen. And that's why we launched podcasting2.org, to try to solve that problem of people don't understand this, or how do we market this? So that we're hoping that then something like that resource, instead of someone like Elsie Escobar saying, this is great, but instead she can just say, this is great, go here to learn more. So she could become an evangelist because she said she's interested in this. As far as like where else there are men or women, I don't really pay attention to that.
Sure.
So I can't really say. And please don't ask me about skin color or ethnicities, because I really have no idea.
I'm not at all interested in that. I was more interested because it is something that I look for. And I'm of the opinion that there are probably some of those women out there. We just don't know who they are. And I would love to see, because I came in late, but I'm familiar with the history. I would love to see us shortcut that cycle, right? Yeah. So I recognize that it's following a similar pattern. I would love to see us shortcut that. So if there are women out there that are technically minded or just want to be that evangelist, my encouragement would be, please do it, yeah. Right?
And some of these features, again, speaking in stereotypes here, I think, Brian, you and I can probably talk about podcasting for hours on end to someone and never let them speak at all. Because sometimes we can just really nerd out, and then the other person's just like, okay, bye. But for women, Jennifer, you probably, again, I know I'm speaking in stereotypes, but women stereotypically connect more emotionally, and they review conversations in their minds when they're away from the conversation. They really like the conversations with people. And what I'm leading this into is cross-app comments. So like even for women podcasters, this presents a great opportunity for them to have those conversations more with their audience, to build more intimate connections with their audience, to engage on a deeper level right there inside of the app. So it's not just about, hey, I'm going to make my podcast look better, or hey, I'm going to offer transcripts, but it can be about making those deeper, more personal connections with the podcaster and their audience, and even enabling the audience to connect more with each other, building a community. And that's also a big thing of what Podcasting 2.0 can do, is to help then those relationships be fostered.
I did want to hit, we had one other comment from David, helping a lot of people he met at PodFest get rolling on some 2.0 features, telling them about getting workflows in places and getting the mainstream will put them ahead of the game. So yeah, I think that's absolutely great. And, you know, again, my heart really is just how can we get as many people as possible enfranchised in this? Because I think it's good for us as editors. I think we do have to kind of take that step back and go, okay, how do I make sure that this is valuable for my clients? Because it can feel to people like we're pushing stuff on them. And I don't think that's not my desire, but at the same time, I do want people to take advantage of what's out there. I'm going to shut up about that. Jennifer, did you want to move on to the Poddex question, or did you have something else?
Nope, I was moving on to Poddex.
Time for the Poddex question of the day. This is where, Daniel, you get to choose a number between 1 and 4. We actually have physical cards. These aren't even available anymore. So choose a number from 1 to 4.
3.
1, 2, 3. You know, we mentioned sometimes there are some that don't make it on the air. You managed to do that. Choose a number between 1 and 3.
3.
Okay.
Maybe you should look at all the choices before we start next time.
Did you just like pick all the bad ones from here?
I think I did. All right. So the question for today is, when were your parents most disappointed in you? And I'm not sure I want to answer that one on the air. So if anybody else wants to answer that one in the comments, you can. How about I just choose one? What was your first screen name? We'll go with that one because that's fun. And the first one I can remember was Maestro Damas, because, you know, I wanted to be bigger than I really was, and there was a music thing going on there, so that was mine. What's everybody else's?
Selene DRG.
What? Selene DRG?
SELYNN DRG. There's way too much to unpack there. I'm not going to do it.
Do you even remember your first screen name, Daniel?
Yeah, it was SGT Kids, KIDZ, because my first business was selling kids' books. I was a teenager at that point, selling kids' books like Adventures in Odyssey, audio drama, children's books and videos and stuff. I was a reseller for Focus on the Family and some other providers. And my mom had a business also selling Christian books and bread baking supplies and certain stuff. And her business was called Simply Good Things. So I thought, well, I'm going to have the kids division of my mom's business so that she can handle all that legal stuff. And so my business would be SGT Kids. But then like certain people started calling it Sergeant Kids. And
Sergeant. Yeah, that's what I thought immediately.
Nice.
Well, we thank everyone for joining us live. If you missed it, you can always come back and watch from the beginning or catch it when it drops. And if you want to be a guest on our show, what do, Brian?
Oh, it's nearly impossible. You have to go to podcasteditorsmastermind.com/be a guest. We chose that link because I could remember it. That'll take you to a magical form that you fill out and let us know if you'd like to be a guest, how we can contact you, what you'd like to talk about. You can also use that form to suggest a topic. So if Podcasting 2.0 didn't resonate with you, but you really want to know how to land that next client, just let us know that's something you'd like us to cover, and we'll see if we can get that in the queue.
And then if it's really about how you land your next client, go back and listen to Q4 of 2023.
We did cover that,
because that's all we talked about. I'm Jennifer Longworth. You can find me at bourbonbarrelpodcasting.com and Instagram Bourbon Barrel Podcasting. Below me is
Brian Ensminger. You can find me at toptieraudio.com.
And Daniel has been our special guest today. What's the best place for people to connect with you?
Please go to theaudacity2podcast.com.
Not appearing in today's episode are Daniel Abendroth at rothmedia.audio and Carrie Caulfield at carrie.land. Thank you all so much for joining us, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks. Our next guest will be Heather Zeitzwolf talking about scope creep. Thank you.
Yay.
So how much is that?